제 짐벌도 님이죠. 오늘 모놈 짐벌가 비었다. 바그르 다르검산도 실물도 돈바 드제 잔라기 점설. 니저로 저링이 정검서 자고 듣기 싫어 일러마. 지금 번조 잘라 소라도 공교 또반 버버 신지로 공교 또반 버버 신지.
The answer path, profound and wonderful dharmas, difficulty encountering billions of eons. I now see it, hear it, receive it, and uphold it. I vow to fathom the Tathagata's true meaning in order to liberate all beings and lights, generate the supreme bodhicitta.
Jordan de Shanchu Senhua. Jordan de Shanchu Senhua Meba Mavala Gavi Junam Chistrip Tabra. Shanchu Senhui Gang Togna Tun number Nibala. Gajan Tonlar Tobe Yonsok Donver Manjero Allah. Terkit Jixoradam Jordan de Shanchu Senhua Sanwa Chimbo Shambalan Derkit Gatsarto Shamba Dala. Shanchu Senhui Mavala Gava Niba. Nirmu Nishi Yoper Tabra Shago, Nishi Ganjina Shamban de la Gerun Mavala Gava Mount to be Jackson. Chagbe Kibame Perengeratan, Sopar Maval Lembe, Shula Mumberjim Perengeratan, Mount Surgeon Yilla Mepshipadan, Yilla Shipadan, Cherry. Trambab Jipper Gervatan, lead on Sim Shindam Avjan, Shivjan Maper, Shopper and Gervatan, Chula Zopa Le Nyambe, Kambadan, Dupper and Gervatan, Jernedan, Lanton Yonsur Panwe, Semji Gidor Murgut and Gervatan, Smaver Rugby, Rugbat Timayim, Bar, Maver and Gervatan, Pugbusiba Matope, Mavdumber and Gervatan. Ladang Hler Namji Mubkurver Jervatan, Soso Yang Tagba Rigba Tobar Namji Nibber Jervatan, Lim Gunsum den Jervar Namji, Juror Jervatan, Jabala Manepe Yellap Chapper Jervatan, Tesum Martno Rapta Mertanber Jervatan, Jal Herlembe Tubatan, Shepchuk Shepa Nyamber Jervatan, Number Shipi Shoyer Chen Yembe, Dopi Yondan La. Chakbaran Jervatan, Yang Tagba Chertava Gender, Togba Mapshipi, near the Churpon Shipatan, Jandang Zen, Zombe, Muftanjan, Stin Meper and Jervatan, Sim Yons, Materve, Kurtu Mepa Tober and Jervatan, Shuji Rian, Kondo Machetpe, Zanji Chang, Manjokber and Jervatan, Wambornam Yons, Mashibi, Nyomombe Wand, Jervate, Shamba Nishipo Tedon. Shanchip Senhar Mavala Gajan, Jatler Lembi, Tonlar Tobadan, Jari Nibanam Yeno, Nirmu Yeno, Dina Tice, Jomden de, Ji Six Japan de, Quarsarto, Tupe Jerne, Keeper Manger de, Number and JP, Mavar Namla Chak, Jeper and Jerjan, Shivjan Maper and Jer, Malaga, Niban de Toko, Nanga Simulation de Ramar and Jer, Lidan Semjan, Rabjan Main Jer. Kangba Donan the Bamamburn Yer, Malaga, Niban the Tako, Shiba Tambi Churb, some raptor Nyam, Sim Mumni Shinder Zipper and Yer, Jerne Langton, Tagdan Raptor Rang, Smava Tagla, Smava Gavi, Niban the Tako, Stuck the Lama, Tagla Kiba Med, Rugby Tam Taglana, Gava Kit, Nyambo Mela, Nejan, Shirp Nyam, Smava Gavi, Niban the Tako. Then Hatsur Namji Mubkerjan, Tetse Telagan, Dopa Merkela, Soso Yanta Rigle Nyamjer, Mava Gavi, Niban the Tago, Gandak Lin Musum Mayotpa, Keban the Takan, Kina Juror and Jerate, Nocturno Tonman Jerate, Malagavi, Niban the Tago, Udanab Dribnium Tana, Chishaji, Chevet Titse, Shibam Nyan Shet. Tan need major Shinder, Dinger and Jer, Magavi, Niban the Tago, Sabjan, Statute Gender, Gerjan, Yoar Te, Tena, Tester, Tesum, Jerd, Ni, Tena, Namian, Loton, Manger Te, Malagavi, Niban the Tago, Garian Tavi, Chodnan, Digba, Jen, Huawo Janji, Yondan, Jopa, Jen, Karla Tavi, Chodnan, Digbaji, Huawo Janji. Yondan Jopa Jen, Daganya the Nandan Yamber and Gervate, Malagavi Niban the Toko, Dei Semner Navi Namshi La Rapta Chaksan, Me Dredjik Sheremian, Lober Semjan, lamgan rover ger malagavi niban da tabko da no yordan yang jang rechadan ger shivshir jang Remembering yet par zoma pagbi tambi chule rapta rang malagavi niban da tabko to chung tertangi na ganjer te mashi damba yojang gerwa yi trigger tritter te yi semna yoveran ger malagavi niban da tabko rungablo na shipe mambe shir momba te na zanji tanglanjo Tēnā nyōmō shukji wāngdān rō shmā gāwī nīpā tā tōkku mīk jāng chir jāng tēpzhīn nāwā yāng chir nā yāng chir jāng tēpzhīn shchē yāng chir lī jāng chir yīt jāng chir wār jir shmā lā gāwī nīpā tā tōkku yīn rāng tīne shmā lā gāwā nā tēnā dāgnyā gāwar mā tōpō cik kāng gāwā tā yī tōp jir wā cik shik tsam shik sam jāng chok yānō wāram shāngshīn nyāngbō jī yāng mē dā gāwar shāwī rō nā nāng nāndik Shinba zupa mina rum virum ru jimbur nipa nipa mayan no jirtar shimba tevjin mawarte rosta wana dala tonsim yin testa vena mala garponte taqda bagyo shula tonsum shi mawi nipa dandar tokjir jang tonji yondan chongde shine na dana shangchim keba ganyin ba tena tonsum badag tena tomsum pala gavar ki tenip jondan de jivshanchu sanwa chimbo shambe tenip jondan de la shanchu sanwa chimbo shambe ndarkichi khsurdo jondan de ndartar mawala gabi kyunur namda tonla simbi yondan nam tevjin shigbe lagbar somba no ngomsar wa lagso jondan de shanchu sanwa chimbo sarwar namgi Tonlap sambab tang te nyangbo mamshi bi mawa la gavar jipana rungo ma toba lakso.
Today, the content of the class is on the faults of chatter. Many people have this habitual pattern of frivolous speech. So in the sutra, and mainly in today's class, talks about one should avoid having too much futile speech. And tomorrow we're going to talk about one should avoid indulging in sleep. I really hope that everyone can contemplate upon these teachings so that your speech can be more straight to the point without too much gibberish. Even when you speak, even when you have to speak, you're not going to speak of the faults of the others, which could lead to the dualistic thoughts of self and others. This teaching is indeed a very good text for the beginners to study. I really hope that all of you could study it well so that whenever you have the opportunity to propagate the Dharma, to build Dharma centers, and you can give teachings of the Vaipoya Sutra of total retention, as well as this sutra, the sutra on generating the supreme aspiration of Bodhisattvas. As a beginner, it's really important to build a solid foundation first and then get into the study of the five treatises. In this way, you can create less negative karma, which is crucial to continue your study. So let us continue with the actual text. Over here, Maitreya Bodhisattva addressed the Buddha saying that, world-honored one, what are the faults of uptaking this worldly speech?
这个世话，就是我们那个隋语当中的话，那就是
Worldly speech, according to Sui Dynasty's translation, it is it means too much speech, too much secular or worldly speech.
什么是这个说这个世话当中的过失呢？那么就是如果观察的话，菩萨呢，因着决定义。
When observing the faults of such kind of speech, what are the certainty of meanings that the Bodhisattva should abide so that they would not generate afflictions? The meaning of certainty means that the teachings of ultimate meaning or teachings on the relative meaning, on the ultimate meaning such as emptiness, and on the relative such as impermanence and so on. In fact, the speech of the worldly speech have all kinds of faults. And the Maitreya Bodhisattva now asked the Buddha to give the teachings so that the Bodhisattvas would know the different mistakes or faults of the worldly speech so that the beginner Bodhisattvas would be able to avoid them and not generate afflictions. On behalf of the assembly, Maitreya Bodhisattva posed that question to the world-honored one. So what should one do to avoid this kinds of worldly speech, and what are the faults of such? And then the Buddha addressed the Maitreya Bodhisattva, saying that Maitreya, the beginner bodhisattvas should observe the 20 different faults of worldly speech. Opposed to the worldly speech, in fact, the speech that's related to liberation, the dharmic speech, for example, whenever we talk about impermanence and emptiness, selflessness, as well as the preciousness of human birth, all of those kind of speech are really good. If the two wise people get together and then converse in such kind of dharmic speech, that could help both of them to increase their wisdom and understanding. However, what happens nowadays is that people would start off with the dharmic speech and then slowly divert into the worldly speech and probably end up in a fight. Now let's look at the 20 faults. The Buddha said that if the bodhisattvas can be aware of the 20 faults of the worldly speech, then the bodhisattvas would abide in the dharmic speech with certainty, and then they will not generate afflictions. Maitreya, why or what are these 20 faults that could be generated out of interest in taking interest in worldly speech? Of course, this question is posed for the practitioners, because worldly people would see speech as eloquence, or who take delights in talking as eloquence. There are people who consider that certain practitioners are very good at talking. Whenever I travel to different places, I meet different types of Sangha members, and some of them are very good at talking, but what they talk may not be the truth. Another example is that look at the salesman in this world. In fact, nowadays it seems that people really value the skill of talking on the internet or when you're looking for a job. If you don't talk much, even if you have lots of inner realization, if you don't talk, then it's very hard for you to find a job in this world. During the interviews, people would feel that, oh, this person's incapable of taking up this job. They may feel in such a way. But today, what we're learning is that as a practitioner, how we should avoid engage in too much chatter. Because too much chatter could lead to lots of obstacles in terms of practice. Other than Dharma, I think we should definitely eliminate as much as worldly speech as possible. So the first out of the 20 faults of taking delights in worldly speech is that one would generate indulgence in arrogance. Also, one would not respect the others. According to Sui Dynasty's translation, also the Tibetan translation, it says that the ones who take delights in talking would not respect the others and would indulge themselves in arrogance. Because they would feel that they're very good at the knowledge they've learned, they feel that they're quite prolific, and they would not respect the others. Throughout talking, they would feel very great about themselves. So that's the first fault of take delights in worldly speech. The second one is that one would engage in lots of quarrels, and that could lead to grasping towards friends as well as aggression towards the foe. There was once a practitioner who engaged in Yamataka practice, probably Gelupa. His name is Zhelo Lotsawa. He said that the more you speak, the more troubles. One should eliminate chatter and chant mantras so that it could lead to happiness and peace for lifetimes, and all merits would arise from such kind of speech. In fact, quarrels and fights usually start off with speech. The second one is that, the third one is that too much speech would lead to the loss of right mindfulness. And lose the right view, such as the right kind of contemplation, such as the visualization, such as life is impermanent, and all of those. If one were to talk too much, the mind will be distracted, and then the practitioner won't be able to abide in those contemplations anymore. According to the record of all Dharma is the mind, it says that if one do not eliminate one's speech and indulge in speaking and chatter, then the mind would also be disturbed without abiding in samadhi. For people who take delights in chatter, they tend to be terrible practitioners. For me, myself, I've been talking for many years, let it be giving speech or giving teachings. But I have to say I'm quite embarrassed that I talk too much. The fourth one is that one would take action in the inappropriate actions, and the mind as well as the body would be quite distracted and disturbed, because the mind and the body is not taking the proper conduct. Therefore, the ones who take too much, who talk too much, they cannot tame their body and would engage in inappropriate conduct. For example, whenever we have a class, we're sitting there and the people who like talking, they would start whispering, saying that, well, do you have some snack? Can I have some of those? So people who really like talking, they would get very unsettled with their body. From our last class, there are people who got a little thirsty. I think it's fine to drink a bit of water to quench your thirst, but to bring a whole bunch or a whole bag of snacks during class is really inappropriate. In that way, your body would be constantly moving around. There's someone smiling behind the pole. The fifth one. Fifth one says that the ones who take delights in the worldly speech, they would swiftly change their mood. Their moods are very uncertain. Sometimes they would get happy and sometimes not. In this way, they will not be able to practice patience, because their moods would get quite low and they would cry, and sometimes after talking for a bit, and then they would get really hyper and start laughing. In this way, they are not very elegant in terms of their conduct. They don't look very steady. And then others won't want to get involved with them because they seem to be infatuating their emotions quite a bit. So the ones, for such kind of person who have such kind of infatuation of emotions, let it be the ones who are familiar with them or not, they don't really want to engage with them because they're afraid of their emotional turbulence. And for such kind of person, it's very difficult for them to develop patience and develop a steadfast practice. The sixth one says that one who take delights in worldly speech would have rather a very untamable mind, because they would not be able to develop in meditation or to develop wisdom. They would not be able to immerse themselves in meditative absorption or wisdom. Because that they do not practice in such a way, therefore their minds are very difficult to tame. Indeed, people who take delights in worldly speech, they can hardly be tamed. As it is stated in the Sutra of Right Mindfulness, it says that the ones who take delights in chatter, they tend to be very arrogant and take lights of the meritorious ones. Though they've seen the Buddha, they uphold no embarrassment for themselves. So for such kind of person, they do not have any right mindfulness. So we can say that the ones who talk too much, usually they barely would practice well. They don't practice well in terms of shamatha or vipassana, and they have rather difficult mind to tame. And then the next one says that it's the seventh. People who take delights in chatter, they would talk at all times without recognizing when is the appropriate time to talk and where would be the appropriate place to talk. In Tibet, we also say that what people should do is that they should speak of one sentence and then observe others' reaction to decide whether they should continue with their speech or not. So people who take delights in chatter rather are very different. They would speak what need to be spoken, also what shouldn't be spoken as well. According to Mipa Rinpoche, I believe we've studied it before as well. He said that the ones who became friends or foes are like such not because of other things, rather it is because of people's speech. Therefore, we should be very cautious in terms of speaking. In fact, a majority of our close relationships or aversion towards the others are caused by speech. Sometimes maybe because I spoke something frivolously and all of a sudden I break my relationship with someone. Or maybe because of some nice speech, then I become really close with someone. In fact, speech could sow discourse not within just two people, rather it could create a discourse or grasping in a whole group, in a larger group. When you speak of language or speech that would sow discourse to the others, especially I think females really need to pay attention to it. For male practitioners, it's a little bit better. The female usually like to sow the seeds of discourse through their speech, and then slowly they will get entangled into those as well, and they have to leave their group or their sangha for that reason. Not necessarily that their speech are true, but the result of such would be that they have to leave the sangha. That would be quite a pity. Anyhow, if we were to speak of language that is inappropriate in terms of time and environment, then we would end up getting to a place that we really dislike, that is really unfavorable. According to Mipa Rinpoche's teaching on the regulation or rules of kings, the teachings given to the kings, there is one particular chapter on speech. I think we've already studied that before, and I really hope that you can study it again. According to the Sutra on right mindfulness, there's also one chapter on speech specifically. Speech is very much related to all of us. If you can speak of a good speech, just like the speech that's described in Letter to a Friend, according to Nagarjuna, he said that there are speech that's as sweet as honey, and people would generate joyfulness whenever hearing such. For example, a Dharma teacher or such kind of good teachers, if they were to give teachings in a class or in a speech, that could lead to joyful mindedness of the group of the great audience. But if people in different environment were to start slandering others and get lots of temper and started to curse the others, that would also create similar amount of negative impact as well. The eighth one says that if one were to have too much speech, one will not be able to stabilize one's noble wisdom. According to Sui Dynasty's translation, it says that if one were to have too much speech, one would grasp onto drinking and eating. Therefore, one will not be able to attain the noble wisdom. According to this translation and the Tibetan translation, it means that one who have too much speech, then that person will not be able to stabilize the noble wisdom or to realize the noble one's wisdom, such as the Bodhisattvas and Buddhas. Because whenever one speaks, the mind would be fluctuating with the speech. Speech is very much related to one's mind. So if the speech is constantly fluctuating, then the same effect will be impacting your mind. The ninth one says that one will not be respected by the Nagas and celestial beings. The ones who speak too much will not be respected and revered or protected by the Nagas and protectors and the celestial beings. People nowadays probably only think that, well, I don't really care if the Nagas or the celestial beings would revere me as long as people revere me. In fact, that is not true, because there are things that we can perceive and the things that we can't. There are things that are apparent to us and the parts that's not apparent to us. The celestial beings and Nagas and their help, supports are extremely crucial for all of us. There are lots of unseen powers and energies that's very important to all of us as well. Sometimes when we see that there are people who are not of noble character and speak too much, these are the kind of people who are not going to be revered by the Nagas and the celestial beings. According to Master Lin Chi, he said that there was once a Chan master back in Song Dynasty. When he was abiding in meditative absorption, through his meditative absorption, he saw two monastics were having a conversation. And in his meditative absorption, he saw celestial beings first came to listen to the two monastics. And then later, the celestial being left. After a little while, a group of ghosts came, hungry ghosts came. At first, they were listening, and then later, the group of hungry ghosts started spitting on them. So this Zen master got really curious. Therefore, he went there and found the two monastics and asked what they were talking about. The two monastics said that they were talking about Dharma at first, and then slowly they started talking about meal. And that's when the celestial being left. After they started talking about drinking and food and all of those, they started talking about how to get more offering. That's when the hungry ghosts came. So whenever you listen to the correct Dharma or talk to the others about correct Dharma, the celestial beings would also be there, would for sure be there to listen. But when you start to talk about food and drink and all the worldly affairs, the celestial beings start to lose their interest and they will go away and they won't be there to protect you anymore. And if you were to start talking about all the neurotic aspects of the worldly speech, you would then attract the other group of beings, such as hungry ghosts and so on. On the other hand, if a person doesn't have a good practice, doesn't have a noble character, on top of that, they would chatter so much, then the Nagas and celestial beings won't revere them at all. That's quite important, in fact. The 11th one says that the ones who are eloquent and have lots of wisdom would look down on such kind of person who take delights in worldly speech. In fact, people who are eloquent, they would be able to see the other's inner character, because they can see that if the other person has inner qualities, if their speech are worthwhile. For example, whenever you hear someone who can give very good presentation on the Dharma, then you would definitely look at them from a different perspective. You would definitely feel that, wow, this person definitely have lots of wisdom. But if a person does not speak of the kind of meaningful speech, obviously the wise ones, the ones who have lots of eloquence, would look down at them. 11th, one would be scolded by the realized ones. So the ones who take delights in chatter and in all those frivolous chatting and talks, gabbles on, then this kind of people are going to be scolded by the realized ones. The previous great masters would also talk about that. They would say that we shouldn't talk too much about the worldly topics. When Pontsuk Rinpoche was still alive, and once during class he would talk about some of the Khenpos do not teach properly on the Dharma, rather they would chat on and on other subjects. That's not good. And then at that time I was listening to an oral transmission from Khenpo Gado, and Khenpo Gado said that, well, Pontsuk Rinpoche must be talking about me, so let's talk less stories and talk more Dharma. In our class, sometimes we talk a little bit about something that's related worldly, but there are things that we definitely need to, or majority of the time we definitely need to talk about the Dharma teachings. But nowadays, worldly people really enjoy to talk about how to keep health and how to watch different types of entertainment and what this movie is about, all of those. That's what people are interested in nowadays. There's a sutra in the Tripitaka. It's called the Sutra on the Wrong Livelihood, taught by the Buddha. It's a really short sutra. The story is that the Buddha in India, once he was giving teachings, and then there was one bhikshu at that time. He only talks about all the worldly speech, on and on. At that time, many Sangha members scolded him, saying that this is only talking about wrong livelihood, but not the correct Dharma. After the Buddha got to know that, the Buddha also scolded him for doing so. This one was translated by this one was translated into Chinese as well, so you can look into it as well. There are Dharma teachers nowadays who only talk about worldly affairs, and whenever they talk about the sutra, they don't have much to talk about it, but when it comes to the worldly affairs, they have lots of knowledge and couldn't stop talking about those. Of course, I understand many people really like to listen to those. They like to listen to how to make money, how to keep health, and all of those things. But when it comes to the genuine Dharma teachings, they're not as interested. Of course, when we talk about humanistic Buddhism, we do need to talk about Dharma and how to relate it to the worldly life. But on the other hand, we definitely need to talk more about liberation. So when it relates to the teachings that doesn't relate to liberation, then the Bodhisattvas or realized ones or the gurus who have insights and realization, they would definitely scold the ones who only talk about the worldly affairs. There are people nowadays who only like to talk about the worldly affairs that relates to what they used to do. For example, if a Dharma teacher was more associated to military affairs before he got ordained, then he would talk more about that. Or if the Dharma teacher used to be an artist, then he would only talk on and on about art. I think different Dharma teachers have certain, sometimes have carry on their habitual patterns into their Dharma teachings. But of course, that's my dualistic thoughts as well. I'm not saying that you shouldn't talk about what the audience wants to listen, but I'm saying that you shouldn't talk too much about the worldly affairs, rather you should focus on the correct Dharma. Now the 12th says that the one who take delights in talking about worldly affairs would not abide in the correct faith. Rather, one would harbor lots of regret and aggression. According to the Tibetan and Sui Dynasty's translation, over here it says that one would not abide in practice, would not abide in meditation. People who like to chat, they would use such opportunities to chat with others, and they would seek such kind of opportunities. They would go to the other's house around mealtime, around lunch, and they would go and start inquiring, "How are you doing? How have you been lately?" Maybe on top of chatting, they can also get a meal out of it. They're probably too lazy to cook for themselves, and so on. Also, such kind of practitioner would harbor lots of regrets and aggression towards the others. 13th, one would harbor doubts and would be their minds would be wavering without being settled. People who talk a lot, they would have doubts around this and around that. They don't really have time to delve into the Tripitaka, and they haven't developed sharp wisdom yet. And for such reason, they would harbor lots of doubts in their mind because they don't have enough time to contemplate and to study in depth. So in such a way, their body and mind won't be able to settle. Therefore, they're constantly fluctuating in different states. And 14th, just like the entertainers would follow the sound and move with the sound, the ones who take delight in worldly speech, they would follow the other's speech and the other's ideas, and their mind would waver like such. Look at those entertainers and performers. They would move according to the music that's played, and they would move to the beats. So they don't really have a mind of their own. Just like that, people who indulge in chatters, their minds would change based on other people's speech and other people's mind. They do not have a mind of their own. And 15th, they would be deluded by various desires, therefore would be changing, therefore would be tethered by the object and tethered by the environment. Because people like such, they have various kinds of desires. Being fettered by those desires, they have all kinds of hopes and fears. Therefore, whenever they hear whatever other people want, or whenever they are in such kind of environment, especially under the circumstances that they don't have, or they haven't developed their own opinion or their values yet, they don't have such wisdom, they don't have such a profound wisdom yet, they would just follow whatever people would say. They would say yes, 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 whenever they hear whatever other people would say, including some Khenpos and Khenmos. They would say that if I were to ask them to do something, they would say, okay, okay, sure, no problem. Well, it seems that they're doing well in terms of listening and following their gurus. But on the other, I'm not sure if they've contemplated deeply yet. Because you have to think about if you can do it yet before you say yes. Maybe now you say yes and yes, but later when you put those into conduct, you say, no, I can't. The 16th, not contemplating upon the truth and slandering the correct Dharma. People who indulge in the worldly chatter, they would not contemplate upon the truth because they have lots of speech, lots of talking, and then for such a reason, it is more likely they would use those speech to slander the correct Dharma. There was once the group of 6 monks who were supporting Devadatta. They once went to the city and started to chatter around the intersection, which then made a whole group of lay practitioners gather and scold them. The Buddha, after hearing that incident, also scolded them, saying that this should not be done. Nowadays, I think some monastics also would do that. Some practitioners, especially the not good practitioners, they would do many things, say many things, especially the newly ordained ones. Their actions are not quite in accord with the Dharma yet. So I suggest that the ones who only got ordained for a short period of time, you should not really interact with lots of the worldly people yet. At least you need to be ordained for 6 or 7 years. Maybe that would get a little bit better. The mundane beings, in fact, or the worldly beings, they're very smart. In fact, if you were to mix with them, especially as the newly ordained, you may appear to be different than those people. You may have no hair and wear a robe. You may look different, but maybe slowly you will get really influenced by the worldly people in terms of their value and everything, and then you slowly lose all of your monastic qualities. Just like how the Buddha would forbid the 6 bhikshus in terms of their actions. As Buddhists, we have to be very careful with our conduct and our speech. We need to know what we can say and what we can't say in front of different people. We have to be able to differentiate the different environment and different audience. We can't just promote what we want and promote what we only like. Then it's not necessarily going to be very beneficial to the others. The 17th, whatever that person would seek for, would hope for, usually they cannot get what they wish for. Because people have too much speech, they'll have many different kind of hopes, but maybe because they speak a lot, and everyone would know the quality of such kind of person. Therefore, deep in the others' hearts, deep down, they don't really want to help them, and that is why without their help, they won't be able to fulfill their wishes, and they would encounter lots of adversity. That is why lots of people would encounter many difficulties and not able to fulfill their wishes, mainly because either it is some flaws in their character, flaws in speech, flaws in their conduct and in their mind. There are some things that they need to correct. That is why there are people who can achieve whatever they want because they have more of a well-rounded quality, and there are people who can't really do that. Also, people have too much speech or who talk too much, chatter a lot. The others won't view you as someone who's respectable. Of course, you won't be able to hear all the negative comments toward you. Especially lots of people who would criticize you in their minds, but they won't tell you at all. As I said before, we are constantly, though we're not wearing the clothing of a policeman, but we're all policemen in our mind. And sometimes we would write down in our mental record about how the other person behaved. That is why people with too much chatter, their wishes won't go very well. The 18th, their minds are not tamed, therefore being abandoned by the others. If one have too much speech, their mind would not be very easily to be tamed. People tend to get very much tethered by their own speech. It is like they're writing their own story. They're creating drama out of their mind, making mountains of molehills. In this way, their minds are very difficult to be tamed, and people will not be able to develop trust. According to Agama Sutra, it says that there are the 5 types of flawed speech that would lead to distrust from the others. The first one is that others won't trust your speech. The second is the others won't receive your teaching or your guidance. Third one is that others won't like to see you. People would not like to see you at all. They would then try to get as far away from you as possible. And the fourth one is take delights in lying. And the fifth one is quarrel. So the 5 flaws of 5 faults can be found in flawed language. Now the 19th is not knowing the true Dharma. The true Dharma Dhatu, that is purity and clarity. So such kind of person would not be able to understand the empty and luminosity of Dharma Dhatu. Also, they would easily follow those vicious friends. People who do not chatter too much, if they develop or immerse themselves or develop such kind of realization of Dharma Dhatu, then they would definitely not follow those wise friends. The 20th, not knowing the 6 senses are afflictions. Because if you don't understand that the 6 senses are the roots of afflictions, if you do not understand the 6 roots and 6 objects, you would not know the reason of your development of afflictions. People who abide in practicing mantra and only talk about Dharma, they don't have much afflictions. Not saying that they completely have already given up affliction, but at least they don't have that much afflictions. People may appear to be similar. A beggar and a president, they may all look similar. They're all humans. But on the other hand, they're very different. They're married, their wisdom, their social status, and all of those are very different. Sometimes we already have the set karma that we cannot change anymore, but still, there's still lots of things that we can still change. We can still become a genuine practitioner, a great practitioner, simply by listening and contemplating and practicing the Dharma. We all have hope to become such kind of practitioner and such a great person. So the Buddha told Maitreya, saying that those are the 20 types of flaws if a bodhisattva would take delights in worldly speech. Well, those are very quick teachings. I think it would be really good for you to review it again and again. And then the Buddha continued to give teachings or repeat the teachings. The majority of them are repeating of the teachings and some are new, but those teachings are in gathas, in verses. The first one is that arrogance about intellectual knowledge, one would grasp onto all kinds of quarrels. One would lose the right mindfulness and wisdom. These are the faults of worldly speech. The secular speech would lead to such kinds of faults. According to Sui Dynasty's translation, it also has one more explanation saying that these are the faults of taking delight in speech, worldly speech. So it means that if one were to be arrogant about intellectual knowledge and grasping onto quarrels, dualistic thoughts, and losing right mindfulness, those are the faults of worldly speech. I believe after this class, many of you would stop talking, at least not taking delights in chatting anymore. Maybe after you stop chatting so much, your insights would increase, and then you would take delight in practice more. So we'll see. There are masters who would remember even one teaching, even if they received the teaching only once. But there are people who would forget about the teaching right after. So you have to implement those teachings into your daily life so that you remember it and use it. I really hope that we can all practice these for our whole life. Over here, the World Honored One stated the 20 types of faults of taking delights in worldly speech. Maybe after listening this, you can contemplate upon it and reflect upon yourself and see if you violated any of those. And maybe from now on, you can correct your previous mistakes. So this is the first fault. Second one says that withdrawal from the correct contemplation, body and mind are no longer abiding in peace. One would regress on the forbearance of Dharma. Those are the faults of taking delights in worldly speech. I have a relative who used to quarrel with a lot of people. My uncle, to be exact, my father's brother, and he would have all kinds of quarrels with the others. Sometimes he remembers to chant his mantra, and all of a sudden he would remember how he should quarrel with the others and how he should fight back to the others. For those kind of people, their minds and body cannot be stilled, cannot abide in quiescence. One would also retrogress from the path of forbearance. The person's mind would not be tamed. Also, such kind of person would not be able to practice shamatha nor vipassana. So those are the mistakes of worldly speech. One would disrespect the elderly and the teacher. Taking delights in worldly speech, their wisdom is unstable. In fact, a sturdy wisdom or plant firm root in wisdom is really important. I think some of the Dharma teachers, after studying for over 1 or 2 decades, their wisdom should be rather quite firm. But this kind of firm wisdom should be gained through listening, contemplation, and practice. Those are the methods to stabilize your wisdom. But nowadays, I think people don't have stabilized wisdom. Today, this is a popular value. They take it. And tomorrow there's another value, they'll take it. And then they're constantly being toyed around by the worldly rumors and the worldly speech and the media and the entertainment, and they don't have their own mind. They would say that, oh, there's a great yogi over here. Would you go and receive the empowerment? You would say, well, no, it's okay, you can go. And people would come to you and say that, oh, there's a really great medicine that cures everything. And then if you have a firm wisdom, you would say, it's okay, you can go there, but I'm not. I'm going to pass. And if people were to say that, well, I know a good doctor and he can cure you of all the different kind of disease and prolong your life. And for a person with firm wisdom would pass on that as well. To continue, the Buddha then said that one would not be respected by all the celestial beings, nor the Nagas and protectors, would regress of one's eloquence. Those are the faults of worldly speech. The noble ones would scold such kind of person who have lots of graspings. Now look at, there are people who sometimes whenever we are looking for volunteers or staff members, the committee would say that, oh, this person has some capacity to do good things, but this person talks too much. No, I don't want this person. And then from the other department, they would say, no, he talks too much. I don't want this kind of person. So the kind of people who talks too much and chatter too much also would waste one's life, because they would only squander their life in chatter about frivolous things and trivial things without doing much. Those are, without accomplishing much, those are the faults of worldly speech. I believe there was once a story that's told in the Dhammapada Sutra where it says that there was once 7 Brahmins at the end of their life or in their senior years. They begged the Buddha to get ordained. At first, the Buddha did not allow them to get ordained, and then later he agreed and led them to practice together. However, after they got together, they thought that the Buddha got enlightened was very simple. Therefore, they can get enlightened very simple. Therefore, they would chat and laugh and entertain each other and gossip behind the others and laugh out loud. All of those. The Buddha, after finding out what they were doing, went to see them, asked them, everything's impermanent, and your life is impermanent. Why don't you take the time and practice? Why are you being so arrogant? And then the Buddha stated that there are 5 reasons that the worldly beings tend to be arrogant. The first one is that when they're young. Second is when they look beautiful, have a good appearance. Thirdly is that they have great power. Fourth is lots of wealth. And fifth is of a noble family or of a noble caste. After saying that, the Buddha questioned the 7 Brahmins, saying that, what do you have that makes you being so arrogant? The 7 Brahmins felt quite embarrassed, and then they practiced diligently. Eventually, they attained fruition. So look at the people around. I really think you should use your time, use your life in a meaningful way, such as chanting and such as reading books. Do not squander your life on trivial things. Sometimes I really am afraid of receiving phone calls from people who gossip and chatters on and on. I can't talk to those kind of people because they tend to gabble for hours. There was once a Kempo. I can't say that I can't say he nags. I have to say his style of speech is rather quite extensive and it would talk for a long period of time. So people usually tend to feel a little bit afraid to receiving his phone calls. Nowadays, everyone, we should contemplate on ourselves. We have our own life, our own time, and our own set of wealth and own set of practice. Maybe I think the worldly people are too lonely, or for some other reasons, they really enjoy chatting and they feel good at chatting is a benefit or advantage to them. But as a practitioner, these are not the kind of things that worth praise. So let it be chatting with the others or spending time with one another, such as enjoying a meal together. It's fine to share something, but you have to also know your boundary. Boundaries are really important, and knowing your limit is really important. For example, if you were to give a speech for 5 or 8 minutes, and you should then definitely follow that rule and only speak for such period of time. There are people who are supposed to speak for 3 minutes, but after 3 minutes up, they have barely started. They haven't even get into their points yet. The other day, we were supposed to have The other day, we had a forum on vegetarianism. I asked the host how long I can give the speech. And they said that you can talk for 15 or 20 minutes, I think. I genuinely feel that let it be having class or having tutoring sessions, let it be engaging in anything, we should be very timely. I myself, I try to pay attention to time. I was supposed to speak for 20 minutes the other day. I was talking at the same time, paying attention to the time, and then I ended up talking or giving speech for 19 minutes and some seconds. So I finished on time. I really want to bring that into your attention. It is the best to pay attention to time because you should definitely cherish the time in your life and not squander your life with worldly speech. Another fault or flaw of taking delights in worldly speech is that all kinds of actions would decrease. One would part from or diverge from the great Bodhi and spending one's life in worry and suffering. It could also bring one's mind to waver in doubts, just like how the wind would blow on grass. The wisdom would no longer be steady. Those are the faults of upholding or taking delights in worldly speech. Just like the worldly entertainers, if one were to say that they were brave, the others would also praise one so. Because people are like that. They would follow whatever the others would say. So that's the fault of worldly speech. By following the worldly speech, one would be deluded by all kinds of object of desire. And result in treading on the wrong path. Those are the faults of worldly speech. One's wish would not be fulfilled, rather would engage in many quarrels because one has the mind of flattery. People who tend to talk too much, they are more prone to talk with flattery and create more quarrels, which would divert them from the noble path and actions. Those are the faults of worldly speech. Such kind of foolish ones, because their mind would waver often, therefore they can gain very few benefit, just like how the apes tend to be disturbed very easily. Those are the faults of the worldly speech. The wisdom tend to regress, and one would lose one's mind of one's awakening mind. The foolish ones would uphold those ones who take delights in chatter. So the foolish ones would like to take you in their club. Those are the faults of worldly speech. One would get deluded by the eyes and ears. Whatever one have seen or hear or touch or to think, all the six senses. So all those six senses and six objects would be easily to delude such kind of person who take delights in worldly chatter. Therefore, all of those objects, those objectives would bring many afflictions. So altogether, there are 14 verses that's spoken over here. According to the Tibetan version, the Sui version, this is very similar. So the foolish ones who take delights in worldly speech, they would squander their life, their human life. Such kind of life is not worthwhile compared to thinking and contemplating up on the supreme truth, on the emptiness, which would generate immeasurable benefit for one. And now a metaphor, just like a cane, a sugar cane, though it does not depart from its skin or its knob. The knob is not the sugar, and it doesn't depart from the sugar cane either. So it's saying that, not saying that one should completely give up the speech. It's saying that there could be speech in it. So the sugar cane is really sweet. But such sweetness does not reside in its knobs and skin. Therefore, one should give up such skin and knobs in order to gain the supreme taste of the Dharma. Therefore, one should abandon all those worldly speech that lacks in intrinsic meaning. Rather, one should contemplate upon the supreme truth. The great masters, the renowned ones, the realized ones, they don't really like to talk about the worldly affairs. They don't like gossip at all. Whenever others talk to them about all of those worldly affairs, all those speech that's filled with three poisons, they would like to divert from that topic, or they would keep quiet. Rather than those great masters, I think the mundane beings would can't stop talking about the worldly affairs that's infused with the three poisons. The Bodhisattvas with wisdom, who understands the faults of the worldly speech, would take delights in contemplation on the supreme merit of the ultimate truth. I really hope that all of you can write down the teaching over here. Maybe the ones without wisdom would think that, why are you going on and on about this? Well, I think this is really very much connected to your previous karma. Because of your good karma, then people, because of your good karma, maybe you will be very interested in these kinds of teaching. You would find, oh, this is so well said, and that is so well said as well. I really want to write it down. Just like when a person who have lots of desire and goes into the shopping mall and would think that I want this and I want that. But people with great merit would want to do that with all the Dharma teachings as well. For such reason, one should abandon the worldly speech that is meaningless and lacks in benefit. Rather, one should take delight in contemplate on the supreme meaning of truth, of the Dharma. In fact, this is exactly what we should do. However, I would like to remind you that it is not to say that you shouldn't speak at all. Otherwise, tomorrow nobody would speak when they're on duty. Then it would be difficult to communicate. I'm just saying that it is not good to continue on and on with the worldly chatter. One should engage in the contemplation of the supreme teaching. This is the supreme Dharma, and that is praised by all the Buddhas. Therefore, all the wise ones should take delights in practice, in diligence. So the wise ones should try their best to decrease the worldly chatter and take delights in practice, in diligence with the truth. If you cannot practice in any other things, at least you can practice in mantra. You can practice mantras such as Pamasambhava mantra, Manjushri mantra, all of those mantras. So we've finished all the verses now, and then Maitreya Bodhisattva addressed the Buddha saying that, how rare, world-honored one. This is quite rare. I think the monastics or the lay practitioners, you probably don't know how many faults and disadvantage that worldly speech would bring to you. Over here, the Maitreya Bodhisattva saying that after knowing the faults of worldly speech and contemplating and knowing the benefits of contemplating on the supreme truth, could harbor such great benefits, world-honored one, how could there be bodhisattvas who would take delights in the genuine truth of the Tathagata and then still take delights in the worldly speech? This is quite important for the bodhisattvas who long for the Tathagata's genuine wisdom would not take delights in worldly speech. I'm sure it would work for you for a short period of time, but I really hope that you would remember this for a long period of time.
Zhubum tsunen zhuwa zhu